Are you ready to stop the self-sabotage and create the life you desire? Well, in order for that to happen, you need to break free from the bad beliefs that are holding your success hostage. You need to optimize the stress by turning it into extra energy for success. And those hurtful habits? Well, we need to give that pain a purpose for progress. Welcome to Stop the Self-Sabotage and Create the Life You Desire podcast.
So, for the goddesses out there, I have a question for you. Do you ever feel like you're having to do it all in life, all on your own? Angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, and if you have a partner, there is no security or support there. Why is that? And better yet, what is it that you can do to be able to turn it around and make it work for you? That's what we're talking about today, is using the divine masculine energy for magnificence, making goals happen in a way where you're actually pretty happy with what you're getting in life instead of just another thing to check off of your to-do list. Okay, so to get us started, Jen is here with me today, who's magnificent in her own right as far as the stories that she shares of success and inspiring you to live your own story of being beautiful. Jen, I have a question for you. So not who, what is it that a man does that you respect? So who is somebody, male, that you respect? What is it that you do that you're like, yeah, I really feel like I can honor that?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, there's two that are tied for first place. So my husband and my son. My husband obviously would be the number one because he has been with me the longest, and so he gets first right of priority. But the two favorite / respectable boys in my life are both my husband and my son, and ironically, they both have the same name. So Gerald and Jer Bear. So Jer and Jer Jr.
Okay. And we won't tell Jer Jr. that you called him Jer Bear.
Yeah, online. Oh yeah,
yes,
I love that.
Yes, where
he's still going to be traumatized from his hockey team referring to him as that, because that's what I call him at hockey. So he loves that.
Okay. and what is it, something that both of them do that you can admire it, you respect it, you feel like you can honor it?
There's many things, but they love wholeheartedly, and they just really think of others. So I find that just to be such a respectable, loving quality.
Yes. Yeah, because the divine masculine, and whether it's in a man or we're embodying that energy ourselves as women, it's designed to protect, to provide, and to give purpose of leadership. And so the fact that they're loving that way, it's because they want to protect and provide, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share somebody, and it's my father who has passed. I really admired his work ethic. He would do whatever it would take to get the job done, to protect and provide. And he was a police officer for over 3 decades. So it went beyond just our family. I could honor the fact that he wanted to give that to the community. Okay. Now, the next question, Jen. Who, and do not share with us who it is, but think of a man that who
please. No, that would be the childish side of me. I promise I will.
Yeah. Can I reveal it? Yes. So somebody where respect is the very last thing that you can think of for them. Yeah. In fact, probably disdain. And that there is nothing about them that you really feel that you could honor in your relationship with them. What were they doing to earn that avoidance from you?
Oh, again, I think that this answer is so multifaceted, but the main thing is kind of the opposite of the two men in my life that I love and respect the most. It's more distrust and manipulation. Now, if I were being honest, I would say, and like you can always find the good with the bad. And so there are qualities about him that I absolutely do honor, that I think other people get the best of. I just think that those other things cause me to step away and have a level of space between us, because it's necessary, because of the mistrust and the manipulation.
Okay. And mine, because it's been no secret on my podcast that it's the relationship with my father. So I can share that as much as I honored him, I'm going to agree with you on the distrust that I had with him. And instead of manipulation, it would have been abuse. Now, it's interesting that you say mistrust, because whether it's manipulation or abuse, for there to have trust happen, they have to know us. And that's the first level. And then the second level is they have to trust us, the 5 levels. Well, they knew us all right, but then they actually use that against us for the manipulation. Okay. So what does this all have to do with the divine masculine and me starting at the very beginning? Do you ever feel like you're having to do it all in life? You're angry, frustrated, and overwhelmed. You feel like you have no security or support from the people in your life. Welcome to the dysfunctional masculine energy. And that's why Jen and I are here with you today, is that we want to talk about the interplay between the divine feminine and the divine masculine, how we all embody both, and how as women, we've actually been taught to use that masculine energy, but in a way that cuts us off from receiving the intuition, from receiving the support, and having to go out there and make things happen. But then we pay the price for someone else, and that keeps us very unsafe. So real quick on this, men and women's brains, I'll get it out, are actually different, in case you haven't noticed. And men's brains actually develop back to front. Doesn't matter with what gender you may feel that you have. Masculine and feminine brains develop different in the womb. Men develop back to front, which is problem and solution oriented. Women's brains develop side to side, which is relationship oriented. But again, we all embody both energies. So I'm going to name off some masculine energies, Jen, and you tell me what you may find that either you seem to resonate more with under the masculine, or maybe what your clients resonate more with. So masculine energy is detached. It pulls back. It's not necessarily engaged. It's independent. It is problem solving. It is analytical, and it is very competitive. So on that overview, what do you relate more with, Jen?
Well, ironically, I can relate with all of those things in a fairly dysfunctional capacity, looking back at who I used to be versus who I am now. That it's, we've had some major shifts in identity, and I had some real epiphanies and realizations in terms of the path that I was taking, and the various choices that I made based on how I was trained, or the belief system that I held on to so dearly.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like all of them in a dysfunctional way? Would there be any that you are now seeing show up in your life in a healthy way? Again, and I'll go over those. Being able to
Yeah.
detach, being independent, problem solving, analytical, and competitive.
Yes, I think again, it's just the part of wholeness that I can see the upside of both of those things in a more healthy way. And so if I had to list one that I would think that I'm probably the better of in terms of separating and then now having boundaries also is problem solving. Because it's one thing to just problem solve for the sake of problem solving and getting immersed in other people's problems, which, as you know, I did quite well for many years. And so now when I'm problem solving, I am more detached and I'm creating that space. I'm making sure it's a problem that needs to be solved by me. And so that's the big key.
Tell us more about that, please. As I get out my pen and paper. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those funny things. A great mentor once shared with me that, this is one of those epiphanies I have to share. It obviously was a Dawnism, but I'm going to spit it out. I might have stolen it from you. Well, I know I stole it from you, but you might have been using it on this podcast. So if so, I'm sorry. You told me once that women have spaghetti brains and men have waffles. And oh my gosh, like for a visual person, that is the best analogy you could have ever given me. I have screamed that from the mountaintops to every friend I've ever known. I'm like, yeah, because men are waffles. And like everybody gets it. Like it's just so crystal clear. And so the funny thing about that, and then, you talk about the problem solving is, I was raised in such a way that I was an adult at a really young age. And so I wouldn't say that I had much of a childhood, and not in a bad way, just in the sense that I didn't know what I didn't know. I left home at 17. I graduated nursing school when I was really young. And I think I just didn't have like the intellectual maturity / capacity to really understand kind of what was going on. And so you've used the expression like you can't see the forest through the trees. And so when you're so close to something and you grow up a certain way, that really is all that you know. And so I had no idea how many problems were surrounding me and how much drama and chaos was caused by others that I ultimately ended up immersed in trying to save various people from themselves to a degree. And that's where I really realized that you can only hold so many plates spinning in the air at one time. And, fast forward 45 more years or whatever. And, I have 3 kids and a husband and a life and a job and all of the things, and I'm no longer capable of doing all of that, plus all of what I've always done for my family. And, that's when rock bottom kind of like reared its ugly head, so to speak. And so you get to a point where you crash. And so upon reflection and lots of words with you and therapy, etc., it's really kind of come to my attention that the benefit of the shit show, if you will, is that I have great problem solving skills. I just didn't have any boundaries in which to refrain from immersing myself in the chaos of other people. It was like that has to be reserved for the energy and the grace of my own family who actually need it. And then, fast forward another couple of years, I had to start pulling back also because it came to my attention through many other Dawnisms that I also was running into the challenge of maybe enabling my children to a degree that they have to figure out and skin their own knees and problem solve on their own, because we tend to parent based on what we didn't have. And when we didn't necessarily have a lot of support, so there might have been love, but, dysfunctional at best, and then not a lot of support, you tend to be super independent and do so many things on your own that it's hard to then cross over and allow your kids to be independent because you're like, no, I need to help you because I didn't get the help. And so, there's both sides of that coin that I see as, both the blessing and the curse, but are much better now. And I'm much more reserved with it.
And I just want to interject here that one of the things Jen does is she presents to corporations with their women that are overwhelmed and burnt out, because Jen said something very important. You typically will parent to overcompensate what you missed. And how many of us women have gone into corporate and we've treated it like a parenting job, and we are overcompensating for not only our employees that are underneath us, but our bosses that are over us, because we're in the same freaking dynamic of our family of origin who taught us this dysfunction to start with. So she will do presentations for your women on how to begin to resolve some of this. Jen, would you please give your contact information? Because I think you just inspired a lot of women with your story, because I'm raising my hand going, well, I had 4 kids instead of 3, but other than that, I can so relate with it. Will you give them your contact information?
That's funny. Thank you. Sure. It'd be my pleasure. So it's Jen Brower. I'm from Canada. Best way to reach me is by text on my cells, 905-872-5366. My email is jbroloveslife@gmail.com if you'd like to contact me that way. I'm a little bit old school. I don't really have a website or anything yet. I do just want to share that my shtick, so to speak, and has been a little bit of my journey, was the goal to become fuckery free into my 50s. And so that is kind of where I'm going. I'm in the midst of finishing off that book. So that'll be an interesting one of the tales of all of this masculine, feminine stuff that we've been talking about. And I'm just in the process of getting to finish the renovation of my, it's a schoolhouse that was built in 1921. And I'm renovating it, and I think it's going to be called the Surrender Schoolhouse. And I'm looking just really forward to having retreats and various things that people can come and get a little bit of this wisdom in a short stint and have some fun along the way, and realize that life's too short, that we need all to be fuckery free at any age.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so problem solving with you and doing boundaries. And for me, I would say detachment, being able to disassociate, pulling back, which is great when you're working with people that are bringing their painful problems to you, and you don't have to get immersed in them and take that pain on yourself. But because you detach or disassociate in such a dysfunctional way, for me, I wasn't able to live in the moment. So when there was joy showing up, I was flatlined. I didn't feel anything. If somebody would say something that should have been upsetting, 3 days later, I'm going, should I have been upset by that? So mine, where Jen, yours was problem solving and learning to draw boundaries. Mine was detachment and learning what to detach and disassociate from, and what to engage, because I felt protected because of the divine masculine within. I learned to protect myself. So you brought up something that you were made an old soul at a young age by your family of origin. What happened to bring this masculine out in you in a way where you feel like all 5 character traits were going to cause chaos and problems?
Well, I think it's just one of those things that you almost like, I mean, when you become the parent at 5, or parents, depending on the situation, which I felt like I kind of did a duplicate role. I did have a dad that was in our house, and for all intents and purposes, I would say he was great at that role. He worked 3 jobs. He was, supporting us and doing all the things that needs to be done. I used to kind of joke that I felt like I grew up with the Cleavers, which was another reason why I had a little bit harder of a time coming to terms with the fact that I had harder of a time. And so, I think that one of the important things to kind of mention on this call, and sorry if I'm squirreling a little bit, is just that trauma comes in various forms. And it took so long for me to realize the level of manipulation and challenges, because I felt like there was a bar, and mine weren't as bad as X, Y, or Z. Like there wasn't abuse in terms of physical and or sexual. So therefore, like, suck it up. There's no real
Yeah.
problem. Well, yeah, there was, because I mean, it rippled through the remainder of my life. And then, you kind of wake up and you're like, I don't understand why I think this way. I don't understand why I'm not happy. I ultimately have created this wonderful life. I have 3 healthy, beautiful kids. I have a great husband who loves me. And yet I'm unable to receive. Like, what is wrong with me? And so it just became this fundamental, like, what the hell is wrong with me, that I really needed to solve finally, because it's like, I remember reading this book, like, wherever you go, there you are. And
Mhm.
when I read it, I didn't fully understand what that meant. And so I fully understand it now. And it's been one of those pivotal things that I think to myself whenever I feel like a little bit off track. It's like, who am I really, and where am I really, and why am I here, versus why does someone else want me to be here? And so there's just been that little bit of push and pull. And so one of the things that I'll share also, just in context, is that I found out when I was 48 years old that the man that I thought was my dad my whole life, and who I grew up Polish, or thought I was Polish, I did a DNA test and found out that he wasn't actually my biological father. So,
And so I'm going to interject.
yes.
This is one of the reasons why y'all want to see about getting on the list for when her book is published, because this is such a great story.
It's a bit of a story. Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So I'll try and cliff note it, but the general gist is, you can imagine, thinking you're Polish with this identity and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins for all of these years, and then waking up one morning and realizing that you're not even his. Now, again, biologics, I know lots of people who have raised other people's children, and they're no less of a father. So don't get me wrong. It's just simply the fact that so much of my life suddenly made sense. And so there were a lot of things that I didn't trust, one being my intuition. And so the biggest thing that went off for me when I actually did find out that that was the quote unquote truth, was the validation. It's like, nobody wants to find out information like that. However, when I found out, it was so validating, because when I really reflect and I go back to something like as young as doing a school project in grade 7 about a family tree, and asking the question about, the year I was born, and then the year that they got married, and the fact that I was actually technically, quote unquote, at their wedding. I was born in January, they got married in May. And that question just being like so blown out of proportion. And it was so innocent, like I think of myself like 12,
Mhm.
13 years old at the time. And it was just like, oh, 1974. Oh, May, January. Like I was able to connect the dots and figure it out. And that didn't go real well. And so, there was a lot of scathing, like, nonsense about, it's a different time and da, da, da. And obviously there was a lot of shame and sadness from that part. And that's the part that makes me sad, is that there was shame or sadness at all. But nonetheless, I get that at that point, would I not only been not ready to hear the information, they certainly weren't ready to share it. But what I took away from it, I guess, was the fact that, like, you're kind of to be seen and not heard, and don't question, because you know what you say isn't right. And so it causes this level of distrust. And so again, when I talk about chaos or drama or other people's problems, so it's like, you kind of fundamentally have this core where you're always trying to nurture someone else from not feeling that angst. And so I kind of took on that angst as my own when I don't even really think it belonged to me. And so
Right.
the part about the finding out that he wasn't my biological dad is more about the validation, the intuition, the belief at my core that I knew something wasn't right. And that
Mhm.
I spent the remaining 30 plus years validating someone else, and like in some way validating someone else to be okay made me less okay, right? And so
Right.
it just had this weird like cycle of events that was pretty traumatic. And so, when I reflect as I got older and like the many graces and wonderful things in my life, that I wasn't able to accept, like it made me kind of really push through, be very driven, very masculine oriented, really, detached, but not from the right people. Like I was more detached from my own family in terms of my kids and my husband, because I was such a driving force, right? It's like I had this business, I had to be this way. It's like, there was this thought process that like I couldn't be a stay-at-home mom because like a stay-at-home mom doesn't work. And I'm nothing against stay-at-home moms. I'm a stay-at-home mom now. And let me tell you, it's the hardest job ever. But my view or my perspective of what a stay-at-home mom was sadness, depression, making your 5-year-old go to the grocery store with a bundle buggy and getting groceries at 5 years old with cash when you don't even know how to calculate what you're buying with the list. Like some of the things that I did so young, I just think like, oh my goodness. And so when it came time for, the learning of the fact that I'm suddenly, I don't think I added this part, I'm suddenly Irish. So it's like, you think you're Polish for 48 years, then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I'm Irish. Okay, well, no problem. Let me kind of digest this and figure out. And so the next biggest hurdle in terms of like the masculine versus the feminine, I'll say, was like, okay, so now that I know, what can I do that is going to be better than what they've done? Because it doesn't mean he was any less of a dad. It just means that there was a secret. The other part of the story is I'm saying this online on a 100,000 person podcast, which I hear the irony. However, it kind of goes with what I'm saying in terms of the fact that one of the biggest things is keeping other people's secrets. Yep. And recognizing that anxiety as your own. And so it took me about a week to digest it. And, my kids are a little bit older now. My oldest has just turned 21. My middle is going to be 20. And my little one, he's going to be 17 at 6'4". And, I just kind of decided, and it took me about a week to really process and cry and be upset and, feel validated and all the weird stuff that comes with the transition of Polish to Irish. And it really just became about, I don't want to tell them, my kids or my husband, to necessarily throw them under the bus. I don't want any disrespect. I'm not looking for anything from them. The biggest thing that kept coming to my mind, like in terms of like foresight, was that there's no way that this is now going to become my secret, because if I kept it from them, there was a level of dishonesty there, because I know something that I then wouldn't be sharing. And so I had this crazy push-pull of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to completely traumatize my children. These are their grandparents. That's all they've known, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? Like it was amazing how quickly the spaghetti became the waffle, and the both sides of the masculine in terms of like the problem solving and yet the relational really marry together in a more healthy way to kind of say, look at like, here's the truth. This doesn't change XYZ for you. It doesn't necessarily change XYZ for me, but this is the decision that I've made. I feel like you should know, for no other reason than I'm not going to make secrets keep me sick. And so here's the info, and, you can do with it what you will. And, as always, when you're healthy, the people around you take information better because they step up also, and they change when you're healing. And so it wasn't this big dramatic thing that I had imagined in my mind. It was actually a very loving, embrace from all the kids. They were very mature about it. Sure, it was shocking. I mean, they just woke up. They just woke up without a grandfather and suddenly not Polish either.
Yeah.
So, shocking to say the least. But they took it on the chin, and they took it so much better than I would have been able to take it at that age. And there really wasn't any drama or chaos. There was a couple of tears and the like, oh my gosh, like, how could they do this? And da da da. And I just said, you know what? It was a different time. And I'm sure there are a bajillion reasons. And the biggest thing for me at this point, and this is how I really knew that I had gotten to a level of healing, was when I didn't confront the situation. I knew that the DNA test
Ah,
was accurate. And
uh-huh.
I made the choice because one thing that I didn't say, so I should connect the dots here, is that I am no contact with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bajillion reasons for that I won't get into. But nonetheless, um, I made a very conscious choice that I wasn't going to go back on the radar and ask any questions or poke that bear because it didn't make any sense. But the main reason, and I will say, just since we're talking about Father's Day and respect, and the fact that this is still a fairly fresh wound for me, is because I don't think my dad knew that I wasn't his. I truly believe that there's no way that he could have known, and that they got married rather quickly. And I think it was kind of just positioned as, oops, and so now what? And then back in the day, what they did was they got married. And so for me, the heartbreaking part of someone that I respected for so many years was I couldn't imagine, like, kind of ripping his life apart and
Yeah.
pulling out the blanket, so to speak, to kind of have him question his entire life, to be married to someone for over 50 years and then just kind of be like, oh my gosh, like, because
Yeah.
another family member doesn't have children. Like, so for him, it means like, oh my gosh, I don't have a daughter. I don't have grandchildren. Like, do you know what I mean? So the
Yeah.
effect is equally as horrifying for him if he doesn't know. I'll never necessarily know if he knows or doesn't know. And I don't think for me that that's the answer either way. I just knew that the unhealthiest person in the relationship, which was my mom, wasn't going to disclose, and nothing was ever her fault. And it just was what it was. And I wasn't going to get the answers there. So it just didn't make sense to try to dig for answers that haven't been available for 49 years. So they're not going to suddenly be available today with a DNA test. I fully suspected that it would have been like, okay, the test was wrong. What are you doing to me?
Manipulation.
Yes, exactly. And so
Manipulation.
just for my own, well, actually, not even for my own peace of mind, but because my husband, actually, I'm sure he thought I was going right off the deep end when I decided to do the DNA test. And the funny thing is like, I absolutely knew how it was coming back. I was fully
Uh-huh.
validated before I even got the test, which was another kind of weird thing. And so he kind of joked like, okay, seriously, I think it's just because, you don't want to be related to these people. You'll feel better if the silliness and the ridiculousness of all things that went down are suddenly like, you're not related. And so I was like, I know you think that, but it goes deeper than that. And so when it did come back, I think I shocked the hell out of everybody else in my orbit, because they were like, jaw dropped, gobsmacked, like, oh my God. They were actually saying, which is hilarious to me, because again, I'm a nurse. I know how DNA works. And I certainly know that, I have enough combined intelligence to properly spit in a bottle. Like, that's literally all you have to do. So promise you, I could not have frigged this up. Like, it's not humanly possible. So, for their sake and their own sanity, and for just peace of mind, for argument's sake, I even did another test. I did the 23andMe, and then I did the Ancestry. And of course, they both came back exactly the same, as I knew they would. But I had to provide others peace of mind. That wasn't even because I was second guessing myself, but they were
Yes.
all like, just like, there's no way, like, you can't be right on this. And so, the joke in our house is when anyone, I should say, doubts me, the joke in our house is like, I have to say one word. It's like, I'm Irish. Like, don't doubt me.
I was right on that.
That's right. Suddenly the pendulum just absolutely swings. So it is kind of one of those funny, well, I mean, I know it's not a humorous story, but we have to find the lightheartedness in it, because I mean, even 10 years ago, this would have broken me. Do you know what I mean? And so the
Mm-hmm.
fact that I had done so much healing and then was able to finally validate a question that I'd been asking since I was 12. And I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
could have given you a million reasons why I thought that something was fishy. And there's way more stories than just that family tree. But I also, part of me, I guess, wasn't ready or able or equipped to hear it. So once I could hear it and deliver that information, and I had enough, strength, maturity, wise woman in me enough to be able to also explain it to other people and my kids, I think it just became that much more palatable. And then the relational side really kind of took over the problem solving side. And that's what I love about talking about the masculine feminine, is because it's so important to embrace both parts. And I can honestly say that for the first, what I call chapter, well into my 40s, I wasn't embracing a lot of my feminine side. I was kind of the man of the house to a degree. Do you know what I mean? I was the oldest, the firstborn. I was a driving personality, to a parent who was childish. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean she came from a gamut of problems, and, it was easier to maintain the level of I don't know and I'm not sure, and oh, you're not like us, and you're the smart one, so you figure it out. And so when I'm figuring out groceries at 5 and walking a mile to the grocery store with a bundle buggy, you can imagine how that would transition later in life as I got a job and as I got a career, and then various elements of supporting, and then once I had kids. And it just the joke in our house is, and again, I find humor in things because it's a way that I can lighten the load, but it became like as though we had 6 dependents and we only have 3 children. So it was kind of like, wow, if we could have just claimed them on our income tax, we wouldn't be so aggravated, because it was just such a weight to carry these 3 other people. And, my dad, although not biological, the challenge that I have with the relationship now is that, he still didn't protect me. Do you know what I mean? And so there was various things that he became, a part of by proxy, for lack of a better description. And so, it takes, one to get healthy and one to either help or pull the other along, or in the reverse. And neither one of them got healthy. And then, I have a younger brother who also kind of follows that path. And so it's, it's just kind of one of those things. It's like, if you can't beat them, you join them. And I just finally decided after all these years that joining them was going to kill me. And I so longed to be a part of them because I always felt like such a black sheep. Well, who knew it wasn't just a metaphor? It was quite literal in my case, which I fundamentally knew. But just the fact of, being my own person and having, the bubble of influence being my own kids and my own husband, and being able to accept love in an unconditional way when I didn't even think that was available to me. And so, it's such an interesting dynamic now when I think of it, because, like I'm no longer detached from my husband, because I guess I don't have to be. I think that piece of, that protection just kind of, falls away because it's healthy now.
You no longer need to be in a fight with him over who's going to be the man in the household.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So what Jen just described to us is that what a lot of us will experience if we feel like we have to do it all in life. We're angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, and there is no security or support from our partners or anyone else. So chances are, if that's you, because it does describe Jen and myself, you were raised by an authority figure. So it could have been a parent, an older sibling, an extended family member, a teacher, a coach, but they made you responsible for their well-being, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And as a female, it was not okay to be you, because the divine feminine has attachment in place of detachment, interdependence instead of independence, intuitive instead of problem solving, nurturing instead of analytical, cooperative instead of competitive. Now, I'm not saying that one of these is better than another, but we should have harmony in our identity on these energies working together. And so, Jen, you shared that you weren't allowed to listen to your intuition. You could not depend on them. There was no nurturing. There was no cooperation. So they actually forced you to be the man of the family at 5 years old.
Pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that Jen sharing her story, when you hear aspects of you in that story, it's because a lot of the same causes for her are shared by you. And so we want you to be able to use the masculine for the mindset to bring you out at your best. And two of the ways that we can look at experiencing an interplay between the feminine and the masculine within ourselves that's healthy is looking at how we handle stress and how we do conflict repair. So, Jen, I don't know about you, but whenever I would get stressed, well, we can handle it one of two ways, actually, one of three. The masculine, how men handle stress is they will detach, they will go maybe to their man cave, but they'll detach, they'll go within, and they'll find something because they're very problem solving oriented. They'll find a way to take action and make it right. Now, the feminine will reach out for support and she will want to tell her story. Now, the feminine can get dysfunctional on telling this story because she'll tell it just to tell it instead of telling it to someone who can assist her in dissipating the stress. So if we just tell the story to tell it about, let me tell you what that idiot did today, that's not going to dissipate the stress. So the feminine looks for support in telling their story, but support that's actually going to help them resolve it. The masculine will detach, go within, and look for a step they can take. But the third way is the dysfunctional masculine, which is to isolate and say, nope, I got this. No, I don't need anybody's help. They can't do it right anyway. No, I am just moving forward. And whatever you're doing, you just continue doing it because I know I can't rely on you. So out of those three, Jen, which one do you think you relied on more of the time whenever you were overwhelmed with stress?
Again, I think that goes in stages. I definitely recognize all three, but I will say as things worsened, which of course they do when you're taking on the lives of other people, literally, I did get to the point where near my rock bottom isolation, and I got this, was my full MO. It was like, oh my God, like, because it started to get to the point where it felt like I was dragging 3 dead bodies behind me to move an inch. Do you know what I mean? And it was always positioned or manipulated in such a way that it was like something that they wanted. But then it was like the heels would be dug in and they would be resistant at every turn. And in fact, sabotage it to a degree. And so it just became like, okay, well, now I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to do it. Well, you can only do until you can do no more. And, I was unfortunately, I lost almost every hair on my head. I was stressed out. I was in full adrenal failure. By the time COVID hit, kind of, again, I try and find the humor in something. So it's like, COVID almost took my life, but gave me my life back all in the same breath. Like it was the only time I was ever allowed to take pause. Like I had never taken a break. It was literally like I had 6 kids from when I was 5 years old. And so, when I think back, like I even worked at 13 full time. And so it, again, that's a huge benefit to me now because I definitely know I'm a hard worker and I've gotten ahead because of that. So, that's not a boo-hoo. But not very many 13-year-olds in grade 7 are working 12-hour shifts at a restaurant 3 days. Do you know what I mean? And so you're not like, I didn't even know that 36 hours a week was full time. Like I didn't process that information until I was far older and I legitimately knew what full time was. And so, you kind of go on this hamster wheel that you don't even know you've started and then surely to hell don't know how to stop it. Right. And so when good things come in your way, you can't even see them, recognize them, nor or accept them. You know what I mean? And so that was the interesting part about riding the wave through marriage is like, there's there's such an ebb and a flow. And, I think I was just like, through the grace of God, one of those things that was kind of lucky to kind of marry a counterpart that somewhat had similar situations, just in a totally different way. But we both ran businesses. And so because he was self-employed and I was self-employed, we had, quote unquote, similar challenges. You have staffing, you have this, you have that. And so, we had that in common, and therefore we had that support of each other. And then, of course, we had the kids in combination. And I would just say, I mean, in full transparency, that we just didn't resolve or solve a lot of, I'm going to say the relational / romantic / personal endeavors, because we had so much on our plate with 2 family dynamics and 2 businesses and then kids, that it was just like, okay, we're going to put that in a box in an attic. And at some point, that'll all come out. And, it's kind of one of those wonderful like happenstances, because now when I reflect on it, it's like, it could have gone really badly the other way, because I didn't have the capacity to even understand my part in it. Do you know what I mean? And so through a lot of healing and a lot of recognizing many of the things that I wasn't necessarily, doing right. And again, the whole right and wrong, it's debatable, but it's just having the awareness to understand, both sides, and to really kind of have that sense of, it takes 2, and, you come to the middle, and then you're able to kind of co-collaborate this so-called life. And, had I had to do that when my kids were young, I think we would have absolutely crashed and burned. But we did have the luxury, again, of the benefit, I guess, of being busy putting some of that stuff in the attic, and then, me like really hitting rock bottom, and then really feeling like myself and my soul was the only thing I could contend with at one moment. It was all I could do to string 2 words together by the time that had happened. And so when you have that much resolve and you're going on, very little for so long, you have a laser focus. And so my only goal for almost 4 years was, damn it all, if I'm going through all this pain, all these feelings, all this backlog of garbage, I am going to be fuckery free by the time I'm 50. And so I'm 49 and a half, and I'm figuring this shit out. And so,
Yep.
I'm still working on it. I think all of us who have had this will be working on it forever. I don't think it necessarily goes away, but I no longer isolate. Right. So it's like, it comes back to your original question. It's like, what is the thing that, kind of got me in the most trouble? What's the thing that I recognized the most that I did that was the most painful? And it was isolate, because I got to the point where I couldn't even speak about my problems. I had so much chaos and drama going on in my own body that it was like I was having an internal seizure every day, but I couldn't. It was like I was embarrassed also to even share the angst that I was feeling, because I didn't know how to even explain it or quantify. Like, I mean, I really didn't know. And it wasn't until I really started peeling back the onion on all of this stuff and recognizing how young it came into play and how many different identities I had that were not serving me, was I able to really start to say, okay, so if I'm detached, then, probably the hardest thing that I'm going to have to do is to accept. And then I remember, this is a little TMI, but I'll never forget the one exercise that I had a couple weeks into therapy, was that I had to go home and tell my husband that basically I'm ready, willing, and able, and anything is on the table for the weekend. And I had to fully accept and not plan or do or say one thing. Like, it had nothing to do with me. It was completely up to him. Well, let me tell you.
Yeah. Control
the best
addict.
weekend
Yeah.
ever for a million reasons. But, the control freak in me, the person who had, spun so many plates, the eye twitch, the what, like someone else is gonna, like, it was horrifying at the same time, but it ended up being, the best gift, because, you just realize how much you drove or pushed or forced certain situations. And so when you don't allow someone to love you in the way that they're wanting to love you, it's really a different animal. And it wasn't until I had that point of reference did I really realize how, like, I mean, I knew how fundamentally bad it was. I had a bajillion stories to kind of support that, but I didn't have the tangible as to how I brought it into my own life, because everything seemed kind of normalized because we were busy being busy. And so when we had that, right. And when we had that pause and COVID happened, and, you know, like all of a sudden, all 5 of us are in the house, and, you know, we're cooking meals and everything's closed, and, you know, we're having fires every night, and we're, you know, we're paused and we're having a great time doing it. It was kind of like the grief almost. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oops. Okay. Sorry. The grief. I thought I lost you. The grief almost of the, you know, missing those years of my kids, and the attention and the various things really started to come into play. And, you know, we had these wonderful evenings out by the fire, and we reconnected as a family, and we reconnected as husband and wife. Like, and it was kind of like, you know, sometimes you can forget along the way why you love each other, and why they're so great, and or what's great about them. Do you know what I mean? And so all of that kind of spaghetti brain was able to be bucketed into all those waffle parts. And then, you know, things kind of married along quite nicely. And it was, you know, having the love and support and the mentorship and the help of other people, because it clearly took a village. Just really being so grateful for having those people, because I hadn't realized how isolated and insular and solo and independent. Like, independence is a great thing. I would encourage that quality for my kids, but not like your main quality, because it takes away from all the bliss. Do you know what I mean? Like, it can be a real lonely road. Well, and quite sad.
And so we look at the dysfunctional masculine as isolation, but yet the healthy masculine is being able to detach, go within, and see it in a very objective way. And sometimes that's needed, instead of always seeing it from the middle and everything radiates out from us. No, stepping back and going, okay, yes, what's the one next step I can take for this? Which brings me to the next piece on conflict repair. So the healthy masculine has been found to make peace with people that he's been in conflict with, or the woman that's using the healthy masculine side of her. She will make peace with the people with the people they've been in conflict with faster than the feminine will.
Interesting.
Yes. So the masculine wants to take action to make peace, because it understands in a healthy way that you need those connections. Now, the healthy feminine, what she needs to do is experience empathy and regret for the mistake, for the conflict, and then she wants to repair. The dysfunctional masculine, because we're all about the dysfunctional masculine and how we've been embodying that in a way that isolates us and cuts us off from support. The dysfunctional masculine says, just let it go. Don't address it. Don't take care of it.
Ignore it.
Ignore it. Sweep it under the rug. Do not do anything to address it. And so
it hurts too much.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one, because if we think about the masculine brain being developed from back to front, not side to side, they're not used to connecting with those emotional states. And you're right, it does hurt too much.
Right.
So which one do you think now you rely on? Because on the first one, on handling stress, I will say I still handle it in a very masculine way where I will detach from it and go within and say, what's the next step I need to take? I am not the type of female that is going to tell her story. There's only a couple of people in my life that I will tell my story to for assistance.
Right.
So I will still handle stress in a masculine way. On conflict repair, which one do you think you do now after your healing work, Jen? Do you think you are the one that is wanting to make peace, which is the divine masculine? Is it the divine feminine, empathy, regret, and then making it up? Which one, where are you coming from now?
I tend to think now I'm more healthy feminine. I think the luxury for me is that my husband was more the conflict repair, healthy masculine for me. And so I am really touchy-feely. And so it's part of the reason why I had so many challenges with like separating myself from others, was because I was immersed in all of this stuff. And so now, sure, I have regrets, but nothing that that holds me back from trying something new again. Do you know what I mean? Because I really feel like those lessons came from the most amount of regret in my life. And I think that also, as a woman, as anybody for that matter, if you lose that empathy and that ability to feel, then you're just numb. And so I'd rather feel it and be hurt than not to have been able to feel anything at all. Because if you feel hurt, the opposite of that is you feel joy, you feel bliss, you feel all those wonderful things. And so, if you can't feel hurt, then I think suffice it to say that you maybe can't feel joy or bliss. And it's like, if you can't feel that, then that's when life really sucks, because there was a long time when I wouldn't allow myself to feel that, because it would mean I'd have to drop some balls.
Yeah.
And that's where I see the big, big difference is now the pendulum does swing both ways. I'm more open to receive. I look forward to being fulfilled and find happiness in smaller things. Whereas before, it's like, talk about not sweat the small stuff. Like I couldn't even, like, I didn't have a second to breathe. It's funny because it's like, when I think of myself now and I think of myself before, not to get all woo woo or airy fairy, but it's like, I swear I didn't hear birds before. Now I feel like the freaking birds are singing at me. Like I feel like, where are they? Where? Like there's all these little like chirpy, and it's just, I'm so aware of it. And I think it's just, they were always there, but now I have a certain inner peace or a little bit of silence or reprieve that makes it sound like they're singing to me. Of course they're not, but it's just so much more prevalent. And you and I both know that birds have been around since the beginning of time. So my ego isn't that big to think that they're just arrived and singing for me,
just for you. Yes,
that's right. I wish, but no,
that would be your mother. No, right. So, because you've allowed the masculine energy that you possess to show up in ways that actually support you, both within as well as the men in your life, that makes it safe and okay for you to experience the divine feminine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the other beautiful thing that I've really noticed that I just have to say, and I would deny it if anyone ever told my husband, but there is a piece again, where there's therapy by proxy to a degree, where I feel like the opposite effect has happened through a level of vulnerability with him. And so, because he doesn't have to be so like, I mean, he's still the rock. Don't get me wrong. It's pretty clear in the relationship who's the sappy one and who's the rock, but he is able to be the rock, but then still have a level of softness and, have a little bit of that ebb and flow where he can show a snippet of vulnerability. And so, he's a big, strong, tough guy, and he doesn't do that very often. But, there's one instance that I can think of just this weekend. And it was like, someone in our family, our nephew has had a new baby, and we haven't had a new baby in our family in a really long time. And so it's been 17 years since my husband's held a baby. Like my son is going to be 17 in July. So,
Mm-hmm.
That to see him hold a baby and to see him, gosh, like he's not that guy. Do you know what I mean? And so
Uh-huh.
that to me was so endearing and so sweet. And so I feel like maybe it's all in my mind, but I don't think so. I feel like, had this happened 4 years ago, he would have been like, oh no, I can't, I'll break him. Like he
Right.
wouldn't have even embraced it. You know what I mean? But now there's this openness, this, more loving, more life's too short, more, hear the birds,
Yes.
kind of little bit of vulnerability that comes with the pendulum of the yin yang when two people are in better, to use your term, like flow together.
Yes. Because when you get healthy, he either has to get healthy or try to force you back into dysfunction or leave the relationship.
Right.
That's the three choices. And as
Right.
you explore what it means to where you don't have to be dysfunctional masculine, then he doesn't have to be dysfunctional feminine.
Right.
You both get to experience the curiosity and the exploration of what's on the other side. Congratulations. Right. Okay. So, the one thing that I want, the one takeaway that I want the women who are listening to this to know is that it is okay for you to use the masculine in a way to bring out your magnificence, but you've got to make it okay for you to be feminine again. At some point, it wasn't okay for you to be attached and interdependent and intuitive and nurturing and cooperative because, as Jen shared, you had to take care of everybody else's problems, but it was at the expense of you. You paid the price for their success. We need to make it okay for you to discover your wholeness, your both sides of you, and by giving that pain a purpose for progress. And that's what Jen does in her speaking. So Jen, share a little bit about what it is that you do, how you assist others, and again, share your contact information, please.
Sure. Well, it's Jen Brower. It's 905-872-5366. My email is jbro, as in Jennifer Brower. So it's JBRO, loveslife@gmail.com. And my new book is Fuckery Free 50s. And I'm just trying to help women and small groups of people through either speaking and or the book and or retreats to move the needle a little bit and maybe just recognize some of the things that aren't working as well and why, and how we can shift into some big change. I had no idea how much I didn't know and how much my subconscious mind was ruling the show based on a whole series of beliefs and identities that were way out of my control, way before I even could give them any thought. And they were, challenging. And once I started working on those things, the amount of shifting that was able to take place was just kind of unquantifiable, truthfully. And I am so grateful to have been able to have that opportunity. And now, I just think to myself, had I heard someone speak like this and make something okay, or, offer someone the peace of mind to say that their story matters and that, they didn't know what they didn't know. So scratch that and start fresh, which was what you really did for me. And you became my person. And so to have that level of support and strength from a mentor is just like the hugest thing. And so I just kind of really feel so indebted and in a pay it forward kind of way that, I must kind of move on and help other people, do more of the same, because it really just comes down to that. And now I just eat this stuff up, and I think you probably can tell that I'm passionate about it. And I just really love it. And I love people. I always have. And I just think life's too short.
So what I want everyone who's listening to this, the woman that's listening to this right now, Jen shared with you some tips, tools, and techniques on how to turn your brilliance on even brighter. And right now, the world's a pretty dark place. in case you haven't noticed. And it needs, to the woman who's listening to this, it needs your light on even brighter than ever before. Use Jen's stories and her connection with you as a way to turn your light on brighter. But first, it's got to be for you. And then it can be for others. And when you do that, the world will be a better place because you're better in it. So, Jen, stay on the line. Don't hang up.
Okay.
And I want everybody listening to this, please reach out to Jen, or you can reach out to myself, 1-636-699-7791, or go to dawnlandrum.com. But you do need to reach out to a mentor. Jen shared that with you. You need to have a mentor who makes it okay for you to be who you are. Just listening to this podcast and trying to make yourself fit into the story isn't enough. You need to be able to tell your own story until the trauma that was created from it dissipates and your destiny begins to pull you forward. So until we get together again, blessings on your journey. But for that to happen, you got to receive your blessings before you can be a blessing. Bye, everybody.